let's get straight to it. 2005 Honda Accord. This is the 3.0 liter engine. This is the upper plenum gasket. This is the lower plenum gasket. And this is the throttle body gasket. First thing we're going to want to do is disconnect this negative battery terminal right here in our battery. Okay, so there's a hose clamp right here we need to remove. On this one is a 10 millimeter. It's normally an 8 or 7, but on this is a 10. So I'm guessing someone put a different bolt in here. But I'm gonna remove this or loosen this hose clamp here. And now I can, since we have the negative terminal disconnected, I can remove this harness here as well. Get that out of the way. So let's take this boot off here. If you get a flathead or a prying tool, you can pry this boot off from right here. And then we can pull this boot off from up here as well. Let's pry that off as well from up here. All right, just like that. Now let's remove this out of here. And if you look down in there, you can see how this tube goes all the way through there. Instead of getting this all the way off, we're just going to turn it sideways like that, because we don't really have to remove that. This right here can be really hard to pull out. So we don't want to risk doing any damage to this boot. So we're going to just leave it right there because it's technically not really in our way. And if you follow this piece here down to here, you will see there's another hose clamp down here that needs to be removed. So let's get that hose clamp off so we can get this boot off of that valve cover right there. All right, so in order to remove this throttle body, there are two 12 millimeter nuts on top to be removed, and there's two 12 millimeter bolts on the bottom to be removed. Let's go ahead and get all four of those off. So to get this to separate, I'm gonna grab behind here to get a grip and just pull towards me, just like that. And I can get that to separate. All right, so I was able to get the throttle body out of the way, and you can see our gasket area right here. And there's some coolant lines here, and this is why we didn't remove these lines, because we didn't really need to. So now that we have the throttle body off, we can go on to getting things loosened up over here. So normally there's a little clip right here. For some reason it's not on here. So you'll press this clip down, and then you'll pull this harness right here off, just like that. There's another harness on the back side here. You need to go ahead and take that one off. It's a brownish harness. Just squeeze that tab right there, and we should be able to pull that up and off. Just like that. All right, so that we don't have to fully remove this, there's a hose on the bottom here. Let's get that hose clamp off and remove that hose. That way we won't have to remove all of this just to get this intake manifold up. If you remove this harness and that bottom hose, then this valve would lift up with the manifold. Okay, so I managed to get this hose here off, and of course that harness. So now I don't have to worry about removing any of this. Let's get this cover up here. Let's by turning these to the side so you can feel where it loosens up. Let's get this hose clamp off right here for this hose. So there's nothing in the front that's holding this on anymore. So now we can focus on the back side. So if you look here, There's a vacuum line going inside of here. Let's get that off. Just a hose clamp, and then we'll pull that line off. All right, if you look down here where the back valve cover is, there's a 12mm bolt that's down here holding this bracket on. This is bracket holding this wire. Let's remove this 12mm bolt right here. That way we can uncover that valve cover from that wire. All right, so there's a solenoid here that needs to be removed. There's a harness for it. You can press this clip and then pull this harness off, just like that. And there's a 10mm to be removed to remove this whole thing. But first, we're going to get this hose right here off. Simplest way for me to get these hoses is to use pliers and start to twist them. And once we get a little motion, then we're able to come behind it and pull it off. Now we need to get this 10mm up, and we can move this whole thing out of the way. So we got this whole thing able to move around now. We just set this off to the side. That way we don't have to remove these hoses here and get them confused with which one goes back on which lip. So we just set this whole thing out of the way, all as one piece. And now we can look and see what we got left. This is power steering hose that's set inside this little clamp piece here. You can just pull that out and lift it up and above and move that out of the way pretty much. So I was able to stuff it all the way over here in the corner. All right, so technically we have everything removed that's around the intake manifold. So now we can focus on getting this inner part of the upper manifold off. And they're just 10mm bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's 12 10mm bolts on here. So let's go ahead and get those up. All right, so we got all of our bolts up. There's a little lip right here in the corner. If you push on that lip, you can get this to pop up. All right, and you can see this is what the inside of that cover looks like. This is what the inside of the manifold looks like. So let's take this old gasket off. We won't be using this one anymore. This is trash now. So once we get that cover off, you can see the second set of bolts to remove to get this entire upper intake manifold off. So there's 2 nuts to come off. There's one here and one at the very end here, and the rest of them are just bolts. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts to be removed and 2 nuts. So that's 9 fasteners in total. Let's go ahead and get all of these up. And by the way, they are all 12mm. All right, so now that I have all of the bolts on the inside of here up, we can go ahead and start to lift our intake manifold off. All right, guys, just like that. Let's get this set down. So back here is where those 2 gaskets that we seen earlier goes. They're known as the upper intake ends. Then we're going to clean up this gasket surface here and some of this soot that's in here before getting it on as well. And you can see this was most likely leaking through here. This side is pretty dry, but this side is pretty wet. So most likely there's a leak from back here anyways. So it's a good thing that we have those gaskets for this. All right, so this is what it looks like once we get the intake manifold all the way up. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to stuff some shop towels down in these holes right here. Now these are not regular paper towels. I would never stuff paper towels down here. They just fall apart too easy, and I don't want to get anything. You don't want to get anything, and I mean anything, down in these holes. So this is what these shop towels are for. You can use shop rags or shop towels, anything clean and sturdy enough that it won't fall apart. and break up as soon as it gets wet. Like these shop towels here, shop paper towels, these, I can actually wet these up and wring them out without them falling apart. So I trust these more than regular paper towels. So once I get all 6 of these holes plugged up, then I can move on to my next step. So let's get this gasket, this old gasket up. See all this dirt and stuff falling off of this old gasket. So that is the reason why I plugged all of these holes up here. So it's already have dirt and dust falling. You can see on top of those paper towels. So that's why I did that before removing this. So this kit also comes with the gaskets for the ends here on top of this intake manifold. So there's 2 10mm bolts that hold these ends on. We're gonna go ahead and take those off so we can change these ends. Okay, so the same way this one comes off is the way we're going to put this one back on. So it's going to go in there like this basically. So this was the side that was on there on the inside. So when we put this on, we're going to want to put that on like that. But first, we're going to go ahead and get this surface here cleaned up and this surface here cleaned up with a rag. Okay, so once both gasket surfaces are cleaned up, just go ahead and put that on. It's really simple. We don't have to make too much out of this. I'm going to just use this to get it on there, and then I'm going to use my wrench to finish tightening this up. And the same way we do this one, you're going to do that one. And this is only if you have the replacement gasket and you're replacing it. So for the kit I have, it came with the replacement gasket. So I'm definitely going to replace this. Right, just like that. Now let's get this surface area here cleaned up some. I can use the same razor. This is mostly paper and glue that's on here. And just get all of this off. All right, so after while wheeling it, it's nice and clean. That's what you want your gasket surface to look like. Okay, so now we flip this over and we see the bottom. So we're going to clean all of this area here. Just clean up around where it goes here. Don't worry about this spot here and this spot here and all that right there. Just clean up the middle where the gasket seating surfaces are, all around these ring areas here. And while you're cleaning, be sure not to get anything to fall down in these holes as well. It's good if you use a vacuum cleaner while doing this. So same thing here with this gasket surface here. Only because I have these holes plugged up and I have a vacuum cleaner I can use to get stuff out of here, I'm going to use the wire wheel and clean the surface up right here too. Okay, so once my surface area is all clean, it's time to hit it with the vacuum. I'm gonna get down in on top of these rags to get any dirt and dust that fell on top. So the reason why I'm vacuuming on top of the rags is when I remove these rags, I don't want any dirt and dust that's on top of the rag to fall down below. So while I'm taking these out with one hand, I'm gonna hold the vacuum hose with the other hand, and I'm gonna continue to vacuum around these rags as I take them out. All right, so that's one. That's two. That's three. We're halfway there. So once we're all the way satisfied with our gasket surface, we can drop our gasket on top. Have to do it evenly or it won't go. So once we get this all on, now you can see I already got my nuts and my bolts down in there, but they're not all the way tight. So now I'm gonna go down there and tighten them all the way up. So remember, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts and 2 nuts on here. So I'm gonna start by half tightening them, and then I'm gonna go around and tighten them all the way up. All right, so I already got this surface area cleaned up here. If you haven't gotten that yet, go ahead and it's time to clean that up. And I got my cover cleaned up as well. So I did the same exact thing as I did on the rest of the surfaces. I used a wire wheel and a rag where I can. All right, so there's 2 bolts on here, one here and one here. It's gonna hold this gasket in place while we get our upper cover on here. Okay, so now our gasket is in place. We can go ahead and start to put our bolts on. All right, so we got all of these bolts and nuts torqued all the way down and everything is tight. So it's time to start buttoning down a few simple things around the engine. So let's put this hose back on here. Let's plug this harness here back in. So this sensor right here that we removed, let's put it back in place with a 10mm bolt to hold that in. And then once you get that tightened down, this vacuum line, put that back on right there. And there's a harness for it. Don't forget that harness until it clicks in like that. So let's tighten this up now. There's a 12mm bolt that goes down here to hold this harness in place on the side of the engine block. Well, this is on the side of the heads in the back. It's just to hold the wires in place. It's not that important, but go ahead and get that back in there. So that's what it looked like right there. That's the bolt that we just put in there to hold that wire in place. All right, so then I'm gonna plug this harness in right here. And then this hose here, let's get that hose back on here. Right by that hose, there's another hose here, another vacuum hose to get on. Let's get that back on. So there's a hose all the way at the bottom here on this valve. So let's get that little hose back on there as well. This AC line that I tucked back there earlier out of the way of the valve cover, we can get that back around in here. So if you need help knowing how your gasket faces, the large flat side that from this dip right here goes on the right side. And I have my old gasket here as proof. So you can see this divot that's in here, that's in the inside of this throttle body here. You can see that that is right here on this gasket. So this old gasket came off just like this. So that's the same as that way we're putting the new one on, just like that. All right, so once you get your throttle body on and you push your throttle body all the way up, your gasket should be hanging at the top, just like that. If it's not like that, then you either have a different gasket or you have it wrong. So now that we have this in, let's go ahead and put our 2 nuts on top and our 2 bolts on bottom. All right, guys, so I went ahead and just finished everything up because this is the easy part. So I got the boot on, I got the hose clamp on, I got my last wire connection on here on top of the throttle body, and I have this clamp on here as well, and I have this side down here. So the only thing, there's really nothing left to do here. So let's just go around and take one last look, make sure everything is plugged in, make sure every wire is connected, all our hoses are back on, and we didn't miss anything. So take a second to check and then we'll be back. All right, so as long as you're sure you didn't miss anything, let's go ahead and put our negative battery terminal back on because the job is technically done. All right, guys, well, that's it.